And the EU is now planning to destroy the trafficking vessels before anyone boards them, as the European Council president believes curbing illegal migration is the main way to save lives.
I think the best way to protect people from drowning is by ensuring that they do not get on the boat in the first place.
However, in recent years, the migrant flow to the EU has been only growing, with Tunisia and Libya remaining among the main starting points for those striving to leave war-torn northern Africa. That as the marine routes streaming from there remain the deadliest. Well, and the violence in Libya, which erupted back in 2011, has only aggravated the situation. That year alone, over 40,000 asylum seekers tried to reach Europe by sea, and that's 8 times more than in 2010, before the revolution in Libya. However, the Western leaders who helped topple the previous regime with a military intervention praised the result as a chance for a brighter future.
Thank you. Thank you. It is great to be here in free Benghazi and in free Libya. Your city was an inspiration to the world as you threw off a dictator and chose freedom.
4 years on, Libya is split by 2 rival governments. That's while militias continue to battle each other, and Islamic State has set foot in the north of the country. And at least one Western leader is now admitting the current chaos, which has resulted in a tide of migrants, is partially the result of the international community's interference, which wasn't well thought through.
It is a fact that Libya is not managed anymore, not even governed anymore. It is experiencing chaos, and the question is, how is it that after an intervention, which took place more than 3 years ago, there has been no reflection on what should happen after? So now we need to fix yesterday's mistakes.
We spoke to Andrew Slutsgarden, who's written a play about refugees trying to get into Europe, and he believes until the EU addresses the humanitarian situation in the Middle East, the migrant influx will grow.
The real thing I think that people aren't talking about in this tragedy is the things that the West does to cause migration. One thing that we could do is very simply to stop bombing the Middle East. We can help to reinstitute the infrastructures of countries that we've eliminated. So, for example, we bombed Libya and eliminated the entire infrastructure of Libya without any real program for what would replace that. There is an immediate humanitarian disaster that needs to be dealt with, but we need to confront, as the West, the fundamental structural things that we do to cause those waves of migration. As long as we're doing these things in poor countries, people will keep coming from those poor countries.
Now, for more on the EU plan to tackle migrant crisis and go after traffickers, as well as the reactions to the plan, you can go to our website, rt.com. Anger over the death of a black civilian in police custody has boiled over in U.S. city of Baltimore, with protesters smashing cars and clashing with riot squads. 12 people were arrested during the unrest. Well, it began with a peaceful march through the city, but some demonstrators began throwing rocks and bottles at officers and breaking store windows. There were reports of looting and protesters being injured, while police tried to restrain them. Some said they were pepper sprayed in the face. Freddie Gray died last Sunday from a spinal cord injury that he's thought to have sustained while being arrested. Police say they chased and detained the victim in a high-crime area after he made eye contact with officers and ran from them. They bundled the 25-year-old into a police van where his arms and legs were cuffed. However, he was not buckled in with a seatbelt in violation of department policy. RT's Ben Swan spoke to the Gray family's attorney.
Before he was unlawfully arrested, he was a healthy 25-year-old man. And after the police unlawfully arrested him, there was a severe injury to his spinal cord, and he died from those injuries.
Freddie was arrested, I believe, just a few blocks from here. Sure. It looks like it was a very short distance over here to the Western Police Department, and yet 40 minutes go by from the time that he's arrested to the time that an ambulance is called.
Right.
Any explanation for that so far?
Absolutely not. The police department should be made to answer that particular question. If he asked for an inhaler, as they said he did, then why wasn't he immediately given medical attention? Immediately, why did so much time pass? If there was ever a question as to why a young black male would run from the police, this case answers that question. Because if you don't, you may be injured.
The outrage over Freddie Gray's death came after several U.S. cities saw a massive 9-day demonstration against police brutality called March to Justice. The activists had marched over 400 kilometers from New York to Washington on foot. The goal of the procession was to call for criminal justice reforms, including a ban on racial profiling and the demilitarization of the police force, but it also led to scuffles between officers and marchers.
And must never be repeated.
Saudi Arabia and its allies have carried out another wave of airstrikes on Yemen, and that's despite Riyadh saying it was scaling back its intervention. The month-long air campaign and civil war have taken a devastating toll on Yemeni civilians.
Allahu Akbar! Fight.
Despite the chaos in Yemen, the U.S. is in no rush to evacuate its citizens from the war zone. Washington maintains there are no plans to organize an escape route and has advised Americans to look for other ways out of Yemen.
Since the embassy closed, what do people do? What can they do?
Well, there's a couple things they can do. They can go to another embassy in the region.
But getting there is something that they have to do themselves.
Well, and we've been actively providing them with information about opportunities to do so, bringing them to their attention, and then once they get there, providing them with additional consular assistance.
Thousands of Americans are believed to be trapped inside the conflict zone, but Washington says any organized effort to save them would only put more lives at risk. Nevertheless, several other countries, including Russia, have been taking civilians out of Yemen. 20 Americans were among some 1,700 people flown out of the war zone by Moscow. Artis Maragaziev was on one of the planes.
As we touched down in Yemen, one thing soon became clear. The faster we took off again, the better.
People's possessions are now being loaded onto the plane. They themselves are behind us at the terminal buildings over there. They should be over any moment now, but apparently there are hundreds of people waiting there. Americans, Russians, Ukrainians, even Britons. And the fear now is that not all of them will be allowed onto the plane. There's simply not enough space. Well, boarding has begun. People are being ferried over from the terminal complex and are entering the plane. They're checking their passports right now, but not everybody made it. Many people couldn't make it to the airport in the first place because of bombed out roads, because of lack of fuel. So a lot of desperation here as well. People are missing family members.
Others got lucky, making it by the skin of their teeth.
We crossed the bridge. 20 minutes later, there is a missile hit that bridge. We crossed.
It took me about 3-4 weeks to find a flight out of Sana'a. Americans, no, they just kept sending us emails.
Soon enough, 2 packed planes filled with international refugees left Sana'a for the African coast. We arrive in Djibouti, host of America's biggest military base on the continent. The relief was palpable, but many still have loved ones trapped in Yemen.
I have to think about the next step to make sure that my family is safe. This is priority for me, so I will try my best to get them out of Yemen.
But as the conflict rages on, just when that will be is anybody's guess. Murad Gazdiev, RT.
Well, one overjoyed American was reunited with his family in New York after they were flown out of Yemen by Russia. RT joined Khalid El-Amari for the emotional reunion at Kennedy Airport, and we asked him what he thinks of Washington's failure to rescue his family.
He said, well, you know, if you leave at your own risk. And if you stay, you're staying at your own risk. So they gave us no option.
I go like this and that's it.
So why were you going like this? What was the noise?
Boom, 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 boom.
That's it. No more war here, eh?
No more.
I'm really, really happy to see my family. They really been traumatized from this war. My little daughter just lost at least half of her weight, and that really made me look really depressed. This is, you know, the most powerful country in the world and actually not reaching out to its own citizens.
But some Americans were not so lucky. One of them was invited by Russia to come aboard an evacuation plane in the Yemeni capital, but he couldn't make the trip after the only available highway was severed by an airstrike. And you may find the following pictures disturbing.
قاتلكم الله أنتم من أيدكم عليكم اللعنة إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمد رسول الله أنتم من السابقون نحن بكم بإذن الله من اللاحقين.
Tel Alamid was hoping to use the road to get his family to Sana'a and then out of the country. They're now stuck in a nearby city while the war rages on around them. Mr. Hamid says U.S. officials haven't even contacted him.
The bombing hit the road between Ed and Sana'a. It was right in Ed, right about the exit to Sana'a. I'm cut off, you know, I'm cut off. I was not contacted by any American official or any American organization. RT was the only organization that called me and contacted a lot of the Americans who are stuck here.
And despite the mounting humanitarian crisis, Saudi Arabia has called its bombardment of Yemen a success. One Saudi prince even promised a lavish reward for the pilots who have been dropping the bombs. Al-Walid bin Talal tweeted that every one of them will get a brand new Bentley, but he deleted the tweet after an uproar.